In this part of the shoulder series, we're going to be talking about the rotator cuff. The rotator cuff is a group of 4 muscles that is the most intimate or most deep layer of the shoulder muscles that connects your arm bone or your humerus to your scapula and the rest of the body. I'm sure you've heard of the rotator cuff. You can't possibly have had anything go on with your shoulder and not have had a physio or a doctor or a manual therapist refer to the rotator cuff. The rotator cuff has a really important job. If you look at the hip is very, very stable. The femur or your leg bone is really encompassed into your acetabulum or your hip or pelvis. So there's a lot of bony stability for the hip. There is not as much of range of motion, however. But with the rotator cuff and the shoulder joint, we have a lot of mobility. A lot of mobility in the shoulder enables us to do incredible things as throwing athletes, with our arms reaching in the back of a car during athletic activity. But inherently, the stability of the rotator cuff is very low. If you think about it, the head of the humerus is actually sitting in the same amount of surface area as a golf tee with a golf ball. So the way that the humerus sits into your scapula doesn't have a lot of surface contact, which is why we need the rotator cuff to keep the connection of the shoulder to the scapula and body. The rotator cuff is comprised of 4 muscles: the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, the teres minor, and the subscapularis. I will go into these in more detail when we get to the exercise portion. But I did want to tell you that the purpose of this innermost layer of muscles is to keep the connection of the arm into the body. So as you move your arm around with your stronger muscles, the connection between the head of the humerus and the scapula is kept in integrity by this group of 4 muscles. The most common form of dysfunction with the rotator cuff is called Impingement Syndrome. So this is when the head of the humerus starts to butt up against your clavicle or your collarbone because the rotator cuff is weak in some portion and isn't holding the arm bone in the proper position. This results in a fraying of the tendon, usually of the supraspinatus, and inflammation and pain when lifting your arm. Let's go to the exercises and see a little more about the anatomy and how we can strengthen this group of muscles. There are 4 muscles that comprise the rotator cuff: the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, the teres minor, and subscapularis. I'm going to go into detail with each one of these, but not so much detail that you want to turn this video off and be bored. The first muscle is the supraspinatus, and I like the anatomy language because supra means above, and it's the highest muscle. It actually comes across this ledge on your scapula or your shoulder blade underneath your collarbone, and it touches right here on your upper arm bone. What the supraspinatus does is it starts to initiate arm movement out. So this first 10 degrees of movement of your arm moving away from your body is achieved by the supraspinatus, after which time the deltoid takes over in lifting up your arm. So this initiation of a movement called abduction is what the supraspinatus is created to do. But what's also really important about the supraspinatus is that it prevents a lot of downward movement of the humerus because it attaches on top. So again, it's a protector of where the humerus is sitting in the shoulder girdle. The next 2 muscles are the infraspinatus and the teres minor, and I'm going to pair them together because they really do create the same action. These 2 muscles live below the spine of your scapula. So if you can feel this little ridge at the top of your scapula, these 2 muscles provide the bulk of the muscle on the back of the scapula underneath this little ridge. These muscles create external rotation of the humerus. So as you move your arm away from the body, this movement is created by these 2 muscles. They also act as the posterior, or on the back, stability of the shoulder. So any force pushing the shoulder backwards will be protected from posterior dislocation by these 2 muscles. The last muscle of the rotator cuff, but definitely not the least, is the subscapularis. So sub means beneath, like a subway system or a submarine, and the subscapularis actually lives, if I were to pull my scapula off my back, it would live on the underneath surface or the subsurface. It attaches on the front, just like the supraspinatus does, and it has the opposite movement of the infraspinatus and the teres minor. So the subscapularis creates internal rotation. So if you were to take your arm into reverse prayer, then that would be using the subscapularis. The subscapularis is very, very important in terms of keeping the humerus in alignment with your shoulder girdle as your arm moves in all directions. It holds that head in alignment and is really a preventer of the shoulder head jumping up if the supraspinatus or the deltoid are overactive. So the subscapularis is, I would say, the most injured and most overlooked muscle of the rotator cuff and the most important in its recovery and strengthening. So we're going to talk about some ways to test this muscle, to strengthen this muscle, and to create more flexibility around it. I would really love to do a summary of these 4 muscles, and instead of using a lot of scientific words, I want to use some everyday examples of movements that you do in which we use these muscles, so it will really land and make sense in your body when we're doing the exercises. So the supraspinatus initiates arm abduction. So if you were to lift your arms out to a T, say in Warrior 2 in yoga, supraspinatus would help you lift that first 10 degrees. Or maybe even if you know the right answer in class and you want to lift up your arm. Supraspinatus is going to initiate that arm lift. So external rotation is created by infraspinatus and teres minor. So just say you wanted to do cactus arms, or take a turn, and I don't even know my bike signals, but this might be right or something like that. Anyways, this is the external rotation that infraspinatus and teres minor would do. And one of the biggest things that you might notice pain or dysfunction in these muscles is if you're about to reach in the back of your car to grab something. External rotation, teres minor and infraspinatus. Subscapularis. Now, this might not resonate with everybody, but in order to unhook your bra, you need to use internal rotation of your arm, which is subscapularis. So if you have weakness or any tightness or tearing there, it might be very difficult for you to reach back and get the clasp of your bra. Otherwise, it might be in reverse prayer in yoga that you're noticing that one arm has a more difficult time coming back. Internal rotation is created by subscapularis. I developed this towel series for one of the classes I developed for a studio that I teach at. And the whole purpose of this towel series is to get the shoulder ready by engaging the rotator cuff for heavier work, like weightlifting or doing push-ups or lifting or pushing your own body weight, which requires the bigger, more superficial muscles. But we want the rotator cuff to be primed before we do any heavy lifting with our bigger muscles, because we're looking for stability first over strength. So what you'll need is a towel, and I like to use a long towel only because it gives us more options. So if you have a towel or a scarf or a strap, try and get one that's just a little bit longer and not too thick. Especially if you're a man, you want something that's quite wide if you have a pretty wide shoulder girdle. So we're gonna take the towel and take it outer shoulder distance apart to begin with, so you have lots of space. Relax your shoulder blades down the back. This is really important. We're not looking at compressing the neck or the upper traps. We're looking for a nice, spacious neck and not taking any of the tension into your neck. You're gonna automatically take tension into the towel. So we wanna have some pulling going on the entire time. This is also gonna create stability in the shoulder. And what we're gonna start with is drawing the rib cage in towards the pelvis so our core is locked and we're just bringing the arms behind the head. So we're gonna start with about 20 of these, shoulder blades down the back, pulling tension in the towel so the towel is taut. You're pulling your hands apart, and we're just gonna get deeper and deeper with how far back we can pull our hands behind our head. Let's do about 5 more. 5, 4, 3, 2, just nice big breaths, and 1. Good, we're gonna leave it here. I'm gonna turn to the side so you can see I'm not arching my back. The abs are locked in, and I'm just gonna see if I can keep that tension in the towel and maybe pull it back just a little further, getting a nice stretch through the pecs and holding for 3, for 2, and 1. And then just letting it go, giving your shoulders a little bit of a rest. All right. Starting again with the hands outer shoulder distance apart, we're gonna take the hands over the head This time we're gonna bend the elbows, and we're gonna work drawing little circles starting to connect to the Infraspinatus and Teres minor. So from the side, we're just gonna draw little circles with your hands, keeping that tension in the towel and creating smooth movements in the direction backwards. Good, relaxing the face and neck. And this may feel very strange in the beginning. That's normal. We're recruiting new motor connections between the brain and the shoulder. Let's do 3, 2, and 1. And then you're gonna take it in the other direction. Good, keeping that tension in the towel because that's gonna keep your shoulder safe. Trying to keep the elbows behind the plane of your head so that you're getting into that external rotation, stretching the pecs. And we'll do it for 4, for 3, for 2, and 1. And release. We're gonna now work on the supraspinatus. So I think you can take your towel just a little bit more narrow here because we're not going above the head. Automatically, you're doing that pull, taking tension in the towel, and you should feel the engagement in the outer shoulder. Lifting the towel up to about chest level, and then starting to pulse nice and slowly just up and down. So what we want to do here is really find this ability to take tension in the towel, to move it up and down an inch, to feel the outer shoulders, and then just create a nice little movement so the deltoids aren't taking over and we're getting into the supraspinatus and the rotator cuff. Then we'll take it over to the left, just doing those little pulses. And if you feel any pinching in the shoulder, if you move it from one side to the other, just keep it centered, no problem. And just under control, abs are definitely engaged. We'll come back to center one more time and then take it over to one side. And you can do this as long as you want. We are looking for endurance in these little muscles around the shoulder, so we're not loading it too much, but we're keeping the engagement happening a little bit longer. Good, and then we'll take it back to center. Good, holding, shoulder blades down the back, and then lowering under control. So using the eccentric capability of that muscle. Good job. Okay, now we're gonna start to engage in the subscapularis. So I'm gonna take a little bit more time explaining this one. We're gonna take the hands behind the body, same distance, outer shoulder distance apart, and we're gonna start with our right arm. You're gonna be taking the right arm behind your back. So the left arm is gonna stretch to the left and you're engaging the left tricep to straighten your arm. What we're gonna be doing as the action is pushing the towel behind us. And so I don't want you to push with your wrists, and I'll show you the difference. I want you to push by pushing the whole arm backwards, and this will create more internal rotation of that right shoulder. So I'm gonna turn to the side and show you what this looks like. So we're gonna stretch the arm over to the left, press it back, bring it in, and then release. The difference if you were just pressing from the wrist is just your hand would move instead of your forearm and your whole upper arm as well. So let's do 10 together here. Straightening open the chest, opening the collarbones, engaging your abs. We'll stretch it over to the left, press it back, return, and again, pressing to the back, return. Trying to get the right arm as far back behind your back as possible. Good. I want you to keep going. I'm just going to show you from the back as well. So we're really pressing the right arm away from your back, stretching that left arm, squeezing, and we'll do it for 4, for 3, for 2, and 1. Good, and then just to finish, let's stretch that left arm over a little bit more, right arm behind your back, and release. So the next 2 exercises are really going to be focusing on the posterior shoulder. What happens because of our everyday life and working on our computers and driving is that the front of the shoulder is often tight and is sitting forward. So it's really important for all of my patients that I educate them about strengthening the back of the shoulder so that the shoulder head sits in the proper location and we can avoid all of this rotator cuff pain and dysfunction that happens. So I'm gonna turn to the side. We're gonna take that towel again, outer shoulder distance apart. Now the first thing that happens is that the shoulders are gonna wanna come forward. So we're gonna place those shoulders on the back body, draw the lower belly in, and hinge at the hips so you're at about a 45-degree angle from the floor. Keeping your collarbones open, we're just gonna press, keeping that tension in the towel, pulling the hands apart, lifting the hands up to the ceiling. You want to keep your chin down because then the neck is long. And we're really going to work on the topmost motion here, holding at the top. Good. Spine isn't moving, it's just the arms moving up nice and straight. And we'll do 3, 2, and 1. You're going to hold it up, and then we're going to drop our body over our legs and take a nice stretch for the shoulders. So let go of your head. If this is difficult, you can take your hands a little bit wider. Just let your arms hang over your head, opening up the front of the shoulder, getting a nice stretch. And then we'll release the towel down to the floor. You're gonna come back to that 45-degree angle with your body, drawing the lower belly in. And this time we're turning thumbs up like you're hitchhiking to heaven. And we're engaging in that infraspinatus and teres minor again because we're in external rotation. So looking down, keeping your neck nice and long, we're just gonna lift the arms up. So you're lifting them up about 1 inch so that they come to the back plane of the body. And again, paying most attention to that top most part of the movement. Good. And I would do about 10 to 20 of these. This will fatigue pretty quickly. So there's no jerking or really chaotic movement. It's very controlled. For 4, for 3, for 2, and 1. And then release. So the last portion of this rotator cuff series is a nice stretch that I want to do for all parts of the rotator cuff. And it's amazing because as we're stretching the top arm, the opposite arm is stretching the opposite muscle. So it's like, I don't like the expression killing 2 birds with 1 stone because I'm vegan, but we're gonna get a lot done with 1 pose. So we're gonna take your left arm on top. So you wanna get your elbow about as centered on the top of your head as possible. You might wanna assist it together and then nuzzle your shoulder blade down so there's not too much congestion in the neck. You're holding onto your towel because then it gives you something to grab on with as you take your right arm behind you and start walking your hands up the towel. I'm gonna show you from behind. So we are walking the hands closer together, pressing the head into the upper arm bone, and we'll hold for 5, for 4, for 3, for 2, and 1. Now, before you let go of this, I want to take just one more little stretch. So as your left elbow's up in the sky, you're going to lean over to the right, opening up your entire side body. So getting into your lats, your rib cage, your intercostal muscles. You know, I would say this is killing 3 birds with 1 stone. And coming back to center, let's do the other side. So right arm is going to come all the way overhead. Maybe give your left arm a shake. It's normal to feel a little tingling or numbness. There's a number of nerves that are getting stretched in that position. Nothing to be alarmed about. Start to take your left arm and walk it up towards the right hand. Remembering to open the chest. Bring your head up nice and tall. I'll show you from behind. Walking your hands closer together. For 4, for 3, for 2, and 1. And again, before letting go of that towel, let's take a nice stretch over to your left side. You'll always have one side that's different than the other because our body is not identical twins on each side. Each side has had a different story. One side of your body is dominant, usually. And then we'll come back up to center, take your time and be careful releasing your arms. And again, some numbness or tingling is normal. Those nerves have been in a little bit of a stretch. So if you feel a little release when you come back out, all good. So you can use the information on the rotator cuff and the towel exercises alone or in conjunction with a subsequent towel series videos I'm gonna be offering. In these videos, we're gonna be working on a longer endurance-based exercise with music, engaging into the rotator cuff. I highly suggest working with your rotator cuff on a weekly basis, especially if you're doing any sports that involve using your arms.